Don't get me started.
Okay, we are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. John Ray Clemmons, representatives, with us this morning, talking about a bill that he has introduced, House Bill 1589, the anti-shaming for students on lunch programs and the like. A lot of you have been calling in and have opinions. So it's introduced. Walk us through the process now. What happens next?
So right now we'll put the bill on notice this week, and then we will have it heard next week in the K-12 subcommittee of the House Education Committee. It's a smaller subcommittee, gentlemen and women from across the state, Representative Terry Lynn Weaver, the chairman of the House Education Committee, Mark White, the chairman of the subcommittees, John Reagan from over in Oak Ridge, Scott Sapicki, and Iris Rudder. They are all members of this subcommittee. So I would ask anyone, I don't know if y'all are filtering calls, but I think everyone is universally supportive of this legislation. And I would encourage everyone to reach out to these individuals that can easily be found on capital.tn.gov website and go to that subcommittee and email these legislators or call them in support of this legislation. This is about protecting children. That's it.
Yeah, no,
it's a simple piece of legislation. There's no partisan bent to this, and it's something that other states have done as well. And this is just, it's not this shotgun approach. It's a rifle shot approach to solving a very important issue.
Yeah, and I should say, we never have filtered calls. These calls that have come through on their own as they are, and anyone who wants to call in gets through. We do censor you with a button if you get profane, but that never happens because we have great viewers. But yeah, we don't filter calls. So judging by the calls just this morning, a small cross-section, most people think it's probably a good idea. So the fact that you've brought this up 2-3 times in the past, I mean, have you tried to get with some of those folks again to get a handle? I mean, is this just one of those things where maybe, Republicans are going to say, look, there's a Democratic bill, we're just not going to mess with it, regardless of what the content is? Or is there some actual beyond the bootstraps objections to the idea?
Well, I'm not going to speculate as to the intent or the opposition other than what I have been told personally, and some of them, again, one of the individuals doesn't like the title of the bill. One individual thinks that children should have to work to pay off a debt if they've incurred a meal debt, or thinks that they should be denied a diploma to be held accountable.
See, it's so interesting to me. I guarantee you his constituents, if they understand this, are not going to agree with it. And I've learned lawmakers, all they care about is getting reelected. So I don't get it. Maybe that their constituents aren't paying close enough attention. There's a zillion bills. But I guarantee you that lawmakers' constituents don't think a child should have to work after school cleaning up toilets to pay for his school lunch. And there just isn't a constituency that supports that, period. Well, so what is this guy thinking?
So you're getting into a bigger issue. I mean, it could be just that I'm a Democrat, or it's also that a lot of the state elected officials aren't held accountable. They represent rural counties. The news getting from Nashville to their rural county, the decimation of local newspapers, the decimation of the media, they're not being held accountable for their votes. I mean, take something like Medicaid expansion. An overwhelming majority of Tennesseans support Medicaid expansion. Did they vote for Medicaid expansion? No. Absolutely not. So there's always some other reason, and again, I'm not going to speculate, but this piece of legislation, this is about children. And if we're gonna practice what we preach, and we want children to perform in our schools, and if we want to ensure educational performance, what better way to do it than ensure that children aren't stigmatized, disciplined, or punished for something that's not their fault?
Yeah, and you still get emails and texts.
I still get emails and texts. I've put it out there on Twitter. You can follow me at JR Clemmons on Twitter. I've put it out there inviting people from across the state to share stories with me, to email me stories, because those are what I use. Those real life stories are what I use when I present this legislation. Right. And I'll be presenting it next Tuesday, 4:30 p.m. in the House K-12 subcommittee.
How many bills are introduced every legislative session, roughly?
So every House member is allowed to introduce 15 pieces of legislation. Okay. Unless they're in the majority, then they give them a little leeway.
Could go more.
So let's say roughly 1,500 pieces of legislation every year.
1,500. How many of them really pass, do you think?
Too many. I think we over-regulate. I think we over-legislate,
but hundreds can pass.
But hundreds can pass a year. And some of them,
and some good ones.
There's a lot of memorializing resolutions, and and things like that as well. But we passed some good legislation, and I would say, people, despite some of my colleagues' best efforts, we try not to emulate Washington D.C. politics. Yeah. I would say 90% of the legislation we pass on the House floor is virtually unanimous. It's just those knee-jerk bills or issues that get brought up every year to try to get to score political points.
Right.
They're clearly one was announced last week to satisfy a certain corner of a constituency base. And those we do battle over.
Yep.
And those are some of those we've passed during my tenure. I still lose sleep over.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure. Good luck with this bill. I mean, to me, I'm not partisan on this. This just makes sense to me. And whether it's Democrat or Republican, I just don't like to see kids go hungry. And I hope good luck with that. Thanks for coming on. We'll see you again soon, Representative. Take a break. I'll be back with a programming note about tomorrow right after this. Stay with us.